Enjoy this Wild Soul Gathering production. I'm Dr. Sandra Marie. Pour yourself a really tall glass of spiritual curiosity and join me for the Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious podcast. In the spirit of happy hour, cheers to some new insights, peace, revitalization, and perhaps an aha moment that may change your life. Welcome, everyone. Our show today is going to focus on activating revolutionary optimism to catalyze movements for a better world. Today, our guest is Dr. Paul Zeitz, a preventative medicine physician, epidemiologist, author, and award-winning champion for global justice and human rights. His latest book, Revolutionary Optimism, 7 Steps for Living a Life-Centered Activist, truly is perfectly timed for a world to navigate this world that's in crisis. Welcome to the Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious podcast, Dr. Paul.
Hey, Dr. Sandra, great to be here.
You're really interesting. You have truly spent 35 years committed to advocacy, holding some pretty impressive positions in the U.S. government, global organizations. You recently also just became a rabbi, I understand. And a lot of your work has addressed this global AIDS epidemic that's been going on for a long time. You put a lot of energy out there to combat the exploitation of children and focusing on equity. When did your passion for advocacy start, and was there a defining moment that led you to this path?
Yes, thank you for that question. There was a moment I was living in sub-Saharan Africa in Zambia in late 90s. I think we moved there in 96. So this moment happened sometime in the first part of our time there, like 1997. I was there doing public health. I was a public health physician. I was working on, child health and child survival, and HIV AIDS was like something we knew about, but we had got the first epidemiological studies showing that 1 out of 4 Zambian adults, men and women, were infected with the HIV virus and they were likely to die. And, I just went on with my public health days and we did what we could. And then one day I was driving past the University Teaching Hospital, which was the main hospital in Lusaka. Back in those days, they called it the departure lounge because people just went there to die. It was the services had collapsed, basically. The hospitals were overrun with patients. They didn't have IV fluids. They didn't have basic antibiotics. And I had gone in there and met, toured and saw the state of that. But actually what happened on this day, I was driving and I approached an intersection, and in front of me, there was a Christian Aid Youth Project. And I had driven by this intersection hundreds of times, right? And what were they doing? They were selling coffins.
Oh.
And they were selling little coffins for little children and coffins for adults. And something happened in that moment where I actually saw what was in front of me and pieced together the fact that we were actually living in an AIDS Holocaust, that these people were dying at large scale at a time where we had life-saving AIDS medicines in the United States, Europe, Japan, and they were not available where I was at in Zambia. So I realized I had a awakening or a breakthrough or a meltdown or all of that combined. And I just said I shifted out of working within the bureaucracies of the U.S. government and the government of Zambia. And I realized that you can have greater impact by putting pressure on policymakers to achieve the kind of real change.
Wow, what a powerful moment. I was gifted to do some volunteer work on the Rohingya reservations in Bangladesh, working in those dirt hospitals. And even back in the United States, I ended up on Navajo Nation, unbeknownst to me, that the COVID epidemic was going to hit. It was an area that got hit very hard. And exactly what you said, I'm in the U.S. and we don't have the resources to treat these people. And it's a level of poverty in our own country that I think, people are unaware with lack of water, lack of electricity. You dig a hole to put your insulin vials to keep it cool. And I don't think it's quite to the extent of what you saw, but it was pretty powerful and it's life-changing.
Yeah, I mean, there's great inequity, as you say, on indigenous populations, Navajo and other indigenous tribes, but also lower economic, racially marginalized populations, the inner cities where mostly Black people live, their access to healthcare, their health outcomes are all much worse. It's a horrible situation in the United States because we actually spend more money per capita than any other country in the world, and we're not getting the positive impact. We're not getting the bang for our buck, and our system is not designed to get the best outcomes for the people. It's actually designed to make the most money for the insurance companies. So they're driving the policies that unfortunately are leaving this health inequity unchecked, even with Obamacare, which was a step forward, but it's woefully inadequate. And I believe as Americans, as people living in our country right now, we can and must and should do better.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I just had this conversation with someone last week, back when I wrote a study, and this was a number of years ago, but not that long ago. Just what you said, we spend more per capita than anyone else. And I believe out of the 24 Western countries, our outcomes are 22.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
At the bottom of it, even though we spent all that money. And then I said, I read this Becker's report, and it listed the top 20 influential companies or people in healthcare. And at the top of the list was insurance company and pharmacy
Oh, yeah, the
companies.
pharmaceutical companies. Yeah.
There was, no Mayo Clinic, no Cleveland Clinic, no individual physicians. It was all big dollar companies. But so that being said, this is going to sort of shift us. We talked a little bit about the demographic for the podcast. And, I've even talked on other shows about with certain situations, the old Dr. Sandra Marie would be jumping, in a car with a protest sign, heading down to Washington, D.C. to have my voice heard. And sort of as I've been growing consciously and spiritually, a lot of that has shifted, and how I advocate looks a little different. And a number of people that I've had on the show were definitely women cut of that cloth who are very active, out there wanting to make a difference, but how they're making a difference really has shifted. And, we talked about the craziness of the world. So your approach to activism is a little different. I know in your first book, Waging Justice, A Doctor's Journey to Speak Truth and Be Bold, you share a personal perspective on how one's deep individual healing is intricately connected with how we can repair this broken world. That's a pretty big statement. Can you share a little bit more about that and what that looks like?
Yeah, so I published my memoir, Waging Justice. Thanks for mentioning that, in 2018. And it was a really retrospective review from birth till I was 53 years old. So I'm almost 62 now. So nine years have passed since then. And what I realized that I wrote the book, to share my story. I felt like I had an opportunity and a responsibility, especially for my 5 sons. I wanted them to know what their dad had been up to. They had no idea. Also, I became aware of my own journey. Like I learned about myself. Like I couldn't really figure out myself. And what I learned was that the path of self-healing and self-repair, I had childhood trauma that I shared about in my book. I'm a survivor of childhood sexual violence at the hands of my father. I had an amnesic barrier for 40 years. I didn't find out till my late 40s. That was really kind of why I wrote that book, to get that out of me and heal from that. And then what I learned, and this is also comes from Jewish spiritual teachings, there's this concept of tikkun hanefesh, or healing of the soul, or tikkun halev, healing of the heart, which is our inner work, our work of taking care of ourselves and self-liberation. And that is like interlinked and directly related to our collective healing, which is called tikkun olam. And so the reality is that we can solve the climate emergency. We could create authentic, participatory, deliberatory democracy and create a healthcare system that was fair, equitable, and the money was being used for prevention and wellness as well as curative, not just all curatives, because everyone's making money off of the curative side. We have to rejig everything. But if we're not healing ourselves internally, then we won't have the critical mass of people that is, I believe, needed to get to a tipping point and get to the point where we can transform everything. Because right now, the entire social, economic, and political systems, our government, our business environment, our whole society, and this is true globally, is all based on extractive and greed and anger and division and separation. And it's taking us very fast on a path of further suffering, despair, and destruction. We're on that. That's what's happening now. And at the same time, there's millions, maybe billions of us that see the possibility of a love-centered path of repair, healing, transformation. And I'm just trying to rev up that side. Like you're all those folks that are on that path, like we have to rise up, speak out, be bolder. And it doesn't mean going out on the streets for everyone. No, the book is very clear about that. Activism is done in many different ways by every person figuring out what works for them in the right moment and the right phase of their life. So there's no right or wrong about it. Every action counts, including self-care, I will say. I'll stop there. But I actually say throughout the book, self-care is number one priority, because that work of making sure that we're our highest self, that we can deploy our energy with wisdom and grace and compassion. Not saying we don't take a firm stand, but we have to be taking care of ourselves along the way.
That's really nicely said. So one of the things that I have promoted with the Wild Souls Gathering Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious is I follow a lady, Pam Gregory. She's an astrologer over in England, and she does a lot of higher consciousness work. And she created this 15-minute meditation every Sunday at 7 o'clock UK time. So for us in Eastern Standard Time, it's 2 o'clock. And people globally come together and they just meditate as one, connecting consciously. And she shares a lot of the outcomes and reports that people get back. This has been going on for a couple of months. And the focus of the meditation is to elevate the consciousness of the world, humanity, and create equity and love and peace everywhere. So that is one avenue that's been put out there. So when I connected with you, it's like you said, it looks a little bit different for everyone else. So I know that we're going to get into this a little deeper, and that you're going to provide some other options for people as they're using your inside out approach to heal and create self-liberation and transform and ignite this optimism. So in your latest book, you describe 7 steps for living a love-centered activist. Can you talk about those 7 steps?
Yeah, thanks. So what I felt was I had the opportunity to kind of pull together a book, a handbook, actually, Revolutionary Optimism. And it's the book that I wished I had when I was 15 and 20 and 25 and 30. Even into my 50s, I wish I would have had this book because it's a synthesis. It's a handbook for several things. One is self-optimization, self-liberation. The first 3 steps are about it's go time, like waking up and figuring out how you want to serve that day, energizing yourself into action mode. Step 2 is really diving into self-liberation. And as you know, this is not easy work. This is work that's ongoing. It's never ending. And so I offer some wisdom about that and some tools and practices. I call them RXs, putting on my Dr. Paul Zeitz hat. And then step 3, I think, is really important because it really links to your listeners' interest, which is it's about accessing what I call unified consciousness. For me and for many people, I don't think people understand that we can access unified consciousness. Like during that meditation that you described, there's many, many ways, and there's no one right way. All the ways that people access that are appreciated. People all experience it when they go into nature or at the time of a funeral or the time of the birth of a new baby, for example. You have this sense of our interconnectedness. So the point of step 3 is that you can access it and that you can then practice. You can build your muscles, like going to the gym. You can work at accessing it, like doing these meditations repeatedly over time, it gets easier for you to access that state. And I think it's essential for us to be able to access that state just for our daily life, but also in the sense of how we want to co-create our world together. The last thing is like, once you know you have it and then you practice it, then it's like you can deploy it. Like you can bring it into circumstances, what you're up to. Suppose you're having a fight with someone, or you're in a battle, or, you're feeling really down and hopeless. Then if you have this practice, you can access that unified consciousness. It's unity consciousness, Jesus consciousness, messianic consciousness. People call it a million different things. It doesn't matter. It's all that experience. And I think it's essential for being an effective revolutionary optimist. Then step 4 is peace crafting. And that's really about the relationship between me and you, like the space between us right now, and also with any person, a partner, children, relatives, or in the workplace, or if you're a nurse and you're out there serving people. It's an opportunity to do peace crafting. And there's a 4-part cycle, which I can go in if you want. The second half of the book, steps 5, 6, and 7, or the last 3 parts of the book, are really about our collective liberation. And so step 5, it's taking all that foundation that we did in first 4 steps and bringing it into, okay, now what do we have to do to create the world that we want to see, to align our inner truth with our outer reality. And that's been something that I've been struggling with my whole life. Like I have this sense and I feel like I'm disconnected from what's going on. So the step 5 is imagineering, and it's about unlocking our radical imagination, our visions. Like, what do we want to see the world to be? Like, what do you want the healthcare system to look like? Let's open it up and imagine it. Me and my wife lay in bed and imagine, a wellness-centered American healthcare system rather than an end-stage curative design system, as one example.
I'm into that.
And then it's about building movements, because none of this can happen by us alone, even within an organization that we're operating in. That's all important and nice. But to have the collective impact that I think many of us seek, we have to work in movements. So I have a lot of information in there about the 10 best practices for love-centered movements, and how do you position yourself? How do you determine your role? It's all like things that you have to figure out. It's hard work. And then step 6 is sparking peaceful revolutions. And that is really focused on those of us that, like me, who want to go out and do direct action. I feel like I don't know what else to do to wake up the public and the policymakers to the opportunities that we have before us. And non-cooperation or resistance can happen from your desk, from your house. You could stop buying certain products. You could stop supporting certain things. And for those people that are doing direct action, I lay out a whole series of steps about how anyone can help them with emotional support, with money, with housing, a bed, all kinds of ways of helping. And we need that, because as peaceful revolutions accelerate, like what we're starting to see on college campuses this last couple of weeks, I expect that to continue to escalate and expand rapidly over the next 18 months, because people are fed up with the status quo. So then everyone has an opportunity to help all those people. Not everyone has to be out there, but everyone can help. Then finally, the last step is unifying within, like unifying that sense of our soul's purpose that we're always discerning and shape-shifting and clarifying, and unifying with others. And like finding ways to break down the silos, break down the separation, break down the caste systems, the systems of power that work at putting one group on top of another, trying to dominate them. And so that's what unifying is all about.
Oh, those are great steps. It's interesting. The very first show that I launched for 2024 was called Evolution and Revolution. 2024 one for the history books. From an astrology standpoint, I'm not an astrologist, but I follow Pam Gregory a lot and a couple of other people, and there's been a lot of talk with this within the spiritual community. As you look at the science of the planets and everything, they're all aligning in a way that supports revolution. It's all about revolution, and a lot of it actually mirrors back in the 1700s when the French Revolution took place.
So you're saying astrologically, the way that the alignments are happening is similar to back then?
Yep, and it's supporting everything that we're seeing. So, like, if it's not a surprise. One of the differences is the consciousness on the planet has elevated significantly, and it's elevating astronomically, day by day as we're moving forward. And I love that you say we're co-creating this new world. So this really is a shift out of the old and into the new. For those of us who are gifted to be on the planet at this time, we are influencing and making a difference with this co-creation of what this is going to look like. In creation, one of the important components of that, as you said, is imagination. It's work. I work with this fellow, Jim Self. He always says some assembly required. Like, it's just not going to, it magically happens, but it doesn't just magically happen. We have to be active participants in this, and our imagination is a critical element in us successfully moving forward with what we see this being. So I think that it's great that you spend time every day putting energy, that you set aside that time to put energy to imagineering your co-creation.
Yeah.
So step 4.
Yeah, now I've started to put that on agendas and meetings, like have a segment of time, in a 1-hour meeting, have a 15 or 20-minute segment to open up Imagineering so that so that we have collective group Imagineering happening, because people love that. It's super fun, right? And what I have found is that I always thought I had these wild visions of a peaceful world, and everyone has them. I'm not unique. And that's a recent revelation. But we're all afraid to share our visions. Creating safe spaces for us to do that is really important. And it's super fun, I guarantee it. And just a quick comment on evolutionary versus revolutionary. Look, things are always evolving evolutionarily. I would argue that there are phases of human history like that where you have revolutionary paradigm transformation. And I believe that we're in one. I believe that we already have a violent revolution already unfolding. And it's, like I said, it's leading us down this path of destruction and suffering. And we can't end all suffering. We can't end all the destruction because the old systems are collapsing and failing. And I do believe what we can do is commit ourselves and see ourselves as part of this peaceful revolutions that are bringing forward healing and repair, and to expand that so that we can shift the directionality of where we're going, bend the arc, as Martin Luther King said, towards healing, repair, justice, and love. And we have to rise right now. And revolutions that actually happen, now we know you only need about 3.5 to 5% of the population on the street. So that's about 36 million people. It really has to be a 18-month to 2-year intensive mobilization. So I think that is starting already. I mean, I think, I don't know what the start date is exactly, but, we don't always have to be in a revolutionary phase. I want to just reassure your listeners. We have to prepare ourselves like we're going to go through something. We want to make it have the best possible outcome. So we have to rise. We have to step out of our status quo. We have to disrupt ourselves a bit. And it's people get scared about it. It's not clear exactly how it's going to unfold. And that's true. But if we don't do it, we're going to have fascism and climate destruction and all kinds of bad outcomes. And we'll have to be in community to deal with all that anyway.
I agree with you. I think that it, honestly, from my perspective, it all started last year. Globally, you saw, protests throughout the world in countries that you would have never expected seeing it. And, even when you talk about war, it's really 1 or 2% of the people who benefit from it and want it. Like, the rest of the people don't want to have anything to do with it. But as you said, passively sitting back, we have to put some kind of energy and action to it, however that energy and action looks like. So your step number 4, peace crafting, it sort of intrigued me a little bit. Can you share a little bit more insights on step for the peace crafting, and how would that actually translate to an actionable steps in the real world? Like, what would that look like?
Yeah, thank you for asking. Actually, I feel like I need to say something now. As a physician, I had an opportunity and a responsibility to define revolutionary optimism, create these 7 steps. There's 23 practices, and I want to let you and your listeners know it's highly contagious, and there is no known cure, and there's no vaccine. So it's like revolutionary optimism has its own life, and peace crafting is an example of that. So I've been struggling myself with hopelessness and despair, and how do I communicate with my family who have different political views than me? And so in writing this book, I defined peace crafting as a 4-part cycle. The first part is being a listening friend. So practice being a listening friend, active listening. And that's hard to do, because I like to talk. Everyone likes to talk. And I'm getting better and better at being a really active listener and really hearing people. And then the second part of it is embracing multiple perspectives. Because frequently, like sometimes myself, I think I have the right perspective, or I'm right and you're wrong, or I know and you don't. So getting away from the binaries there and this versus that, and just like really opening up, embracing the idea that there are multiple perspectives. And I actually believe there's 8 billion people on the planet, and there's about 8 billion perspectives, because we have different genes, we have different life experience, we have different information that we access. And it's not static. Our perspectives are always changing. I'm frequently encountering people now who are telling me what I think. And I'm like, you don't know what I'm thinking. I am different than I was yesterday. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I debate myself. I can't, I'm always like trying to figure out what perspective I have. It's not a static thing. Then the third thing is reacting and using love speech. This is a hard one. You're in a peace crafting situation and someone says something to be provocative or to intentionally trigger you. So you get triggered, and then you want to like smash them down, or you want to shame them, or whatever way you might react if your lizard brain is running the show. I describe the lizard brain in step 2 under self-liberation. That's that inner dragon that paralyzes me and makes me a jerk. So I have learned to practice love speech, recognizing that my words matter. My words have an impact on me and on the other people that I'm around. And using speech that is what I call counter shaming, because everyone is dealing with shame. So if I say something a certain way, I might induce shaming. So I have to really be mindful of that. The last part of it is building trust. So once you're a good listening friend, you're understanding multiple perspectives, you're using love speech, you still have your point of view and your position. And then how do you build trust with people who agree or don't agree so that you can continue being in a dialogue? Frequently, in my life at times, and I've observed in other people, they think of trust as being an on and off switch. Like, I trust you now, and then you broke my trust, and goodbye. Thank you and goodbye. I'm never going to trust you again. And this also happens with organizations. This organization did something that I didn't like, so they're off my radar. What I created, me and my friends created many years ago in advocacy, we created a trustometer so that you can go up or down on the trustometer. I started from the position of I love everyone, literally, unconditionally, at the soul level. But then I don't trust you. I don't trust everyone. So you have to build my trust, and it's dynamic. Like, I might not trust you today, but tomorrow I could. I stand for the possibility that I can build trust with anyone over time. That's the way the trustometer works. So it's been amazing since I created it last year, and I've been living into it. It's like it's circling in my head. So I'm like, with my wife, we're in a discussion or we're in a battle over something ridiculous, and I'm being a jerk, and I'm like, damn, what happened to that what happened to my peace crafting capabilities, Then last week I went to Israel, Palestine on a peace pilgrimage, to really like be a listening friend and listen to multiple perspectives. Oh my God. I was like, I put peace crafting through a stress test, to be able to like get through a very difficult environment with very different points of view, a lot of dehumanizing of the other, a lot of hatred, a lot of anger, a lot of fear, a lot of traumatized people. I had to hold myself in peace crafting. So that wheel that I just described, that cycle, those 4 steps, those 4 parts rather of peace crafting, very much alive in me. And I'm learning about it. I walk around with the book. I mean, I'm doing the practices, in my life. I'm living as a revolutionary optimist. So each of them become part of what I have to continue growing with and learning from.
Can you give me an example of love language, what that may sound like, and the anti-shaming language, what that might sound like?
Yeah. So, for example, I'm sitting with someone who I, kind of vehemently disagree with, and they're even offending me with language about talking down and dehumanizing the other. And I'm really angry and sad and grief stricken about the fact that this person is communicating this way. And then I say, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. And I start with the question of, are you open to exploring the possibility of different multiple perspectives? And that takes a while, because people that have a rigid fixed narrative or rigid fixed idea of their truth being the only truth, they're not even open to exploring the possibility of other perspectives. So then once you get through the barrier of, okay, yeah, I'm willing to explore other perspectives in a loving, peaceful way, then it's like sometimes people think their truth is the only truth. So then I say, are you open to the possibility that there might be multiple truths? And then I give my line about, well, I think there's 8 billion truths. And I say, my truth is not static, it's evolving, So I try to open up truth as being dynamic. It's not fixed and rigid, it's evolving. We're all evolving with that. So counter shaming is like an example. I was a supervisor over an employee. I tell the story in the book. And this employee was saying something to me like, oh, I got the contract done 2 weeks ahead of schedule. And then I was being like obsessively wanting to improve efficiency. And I said, well, couldn't we have done it faster? And the person got really upset. And I could see that they got upset. And I should have said, person, I forget their name, Sally, I recognize that you did great work, and I apologize for questioning that at this moment. And I was just thinking about future efficiency opportunities. So please accept my forgiveness, So instead, I just moved on and ignored her reaction. So like that was shaming. Like she thought she had performed well. I was her supervisor. I kind of dissed her performance in front of other colleagues. She went in, I saw her close down, and, it triggered something in her, and I just ignored it and just went on with the meeting, So that is shame inducing. And I learned a lot from that.
I appreciate your vulnerability on that and sharing those examples, because that makes it more tangible, I think, for people as they're listening to it. So thank you very much for that. And I also want to say kudos to you for putting yourself physically in an area of conflict that the whole world's looking at and walking the talk, trying to make a difference to bring peace and understanding and bring ideology together and create a better. So thank you for doing that. With a quick little shift, do you think that people can be overly optimistic? Is there like 2 sides to that coin?
Yeah, I mean, I think there can be something called delusional optimism, where you're like just delusionally optimistic. I try to be a revolutionary optimist with unbridled radical imagination and imagineering, but pragmatism and real world approaches to manifesting our visions through movement building and revolutionary action. I think, I'm not sure. I think all imaginations are welcomed. The question is, what ideas are generated, what visions that we generate can we manifest? That's what my book is about. Step 5, Imagineering, is really, it gets really detailed and grounded in, okay, you have a vision. How do we get it to happen? That's the work.
I think the concept, and I know I spoke about it a little earlier, of Imagineering and creating our new world, like it's there, it's real, it's not really been talked about. So I love that you're putting it out there like concretely and having discussions about it. I've heard of a few other people introduce that concept and just how important it is. So I'm excited to see that grow, because I think it's like an aha moment where people will go, I guess I just never thought of it that way before.
Yeah, I mean, we're so trained and our culture is so passive in accepting our reality. For example, we look at the presidential campaign and we say, okay, we have to pick within the lesser of these two evils. I have had to do that my whole life. I have felt that way. And it's actually not, it's like, it's part of the oppression systems that live in our mind, that stop us from imagining and then manifesting a different social, economic, and political system where we could have an open debate of possible candidates, and we could really listen and learn and debate and deliberate about the future of our country, not coronation ceremonies for two people in their near 80s who should be really spending time with their grandkids, in my opinion.
Well, many people feel or have had moments where they think that their choices and actions don't honestly make a difference. There's that feeling of powerlessness. This is so big. How can I make a difference? What would you say to them?
My book is for them because I find that when I'm talking to people are always, not always, some people diminish what they're actually doing. And they don't think, and then what they do, they say it's not having an impact. That's a very common inner dragon story that goes on. I'm not good enough. I'm not having an impact. That's your inner dragon saying all that. But that's my inner dragon. I'll speak for myself. When I hear those messages, and I do hear them, I have heard them a lot over the years. So I have to discern, okay, could I be doing more, or am I doing enough? Maybe I should just acknowledge that I am doing a lot and it matters. And this is where every action counts. Culture really counts. So if I'm taking a break for self-care and I'm getting a massage and I'm going on a hike or I'm doing a meditation, that's an action. That's a love-centered action. So you're a love-centered activist. If you're caring for an elderly person or your children or your partner or your neighbor, and you're helping them in a love-centered way, then that's a love-centered action. Every action counts. Then you're part of the revolution, So I just want to invite people to open up and recognize their own power and receive the praise that they deserve from the great mystery for the beauty of what people are up to. It's amazing what people cope with in their lives, the resilience but their inner dragon is saying, you're not good enough. You're not good enough. I'm not having an impact. I'm not having an impact. So it's recognizing that that's not really the truth. It's like a false narrative in your own mind, in my own mind of what's going on. So I had to identify that and say, hey, thank you. I'm going to go with, I'm doing a lot, and I'm going to say, keep going. You're doing pretty good for an old man like yourself.
Well, I agree. I feel like we all have power and we are all able to influence. I feel like power is honestly no more than the ability to influence, to make a difference. I, as you said, haven't always felt that way. And, self-talk has been an issue. And, that issue is less and less, but it still pops up in there. Mm-hmm. And, again, I'm going to say we just make a difference with sitting there and putting energy and love and thought and prayer or meditation or whatever you call that out there, mm-hmm. and imagining, looking, this is what's going to be different. You're making a difference when you do that. It may not feel like you're making a difference, but you're just, I'm going to go with you, trust inside to know that you're making that difference with that. Beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah, I do it as a game too. Okay, I'm going to go food shopping, which I really don't like doing anymore, or going shopping for clothes, which I really hate doing. But I kind of like prepare myself and I say, okay, I'm going to be a secret heart. I'm going to be like a loving, I'm just going to walk through these environments that I really don't want to be in. And I'm just going to be love, a love field. I'm going to be loving everything I see. I'm going to be appreciating it as a journey of exploration. And what changes is me. Like, so I'm not putting out all that negative energy. And then I don't know what all the ripples are, but I agree with you. There are ripples of that. So I'm smiling at someone, I'm saying hi to someone, or there's a person that is like dropping their bags because they're old or whatever, and I go and help them. When I'm in the secret heart, or I'm pretending I'm a love force, then how I act is different.
That makes so much sense. So when I get out of my head and I go into my heart and I come from my heart, it's a total shift within myself, but you do see the ripple effects. You see how that like smile and gosh, someone said hello to me or even just nodded at me. You don't know the impact and the influence that it has on it. And we're so geared to looking at the outside as our validation for everything, and as if that's where the truth comes from. And this whole everything comes from the inside
Mm,
is such a foreign concept to many people, but it's definitely an awakening for a lot of people that it's coming from the inner work really affects everything externally. And I
yeah.
think that's the crux. Like those are core elements of everything that you're putting out there, your work, your personal work, and then your global work.
Yeah. Well said. An optimism expert from Australia gave me this like really pragmatic practice. You know how we walk around in the United States, we say, "Hey, how are you?" And then it's like you either say I'm fine when you're really not fine. It's like superficial, you're not really, or if you really answer it, it's like, will the other person really want to listen to how I'm really doing? So I go through all that kind of like story in my head. So this person, Victor Purton, advised me to create a new way of interacting. You say, "Hey, what was the greatest thing that happened to you today?" And then the person has to like think about like what happened today. Oh, I got to meet Dr. Sandra on a podcast. So I can say, so it's like it gets my brain into thinking about what is good that's happening rather than all the whatever bad is happening. You know what I mean? So it's a fun experiment to go around and say, what was the greatest thing that happened to you today? Instead of how are you?
That's great. And it puts it in a more tangible way of what you're going to answer, right? So it's more focused versus that broad stroke kind of thing. I actually have a gratitude partner that I've had for a number of years. We actually met when I was living in the Middle East, and to this day, we still share. You shouldn't have rules, but our rule is 3 or more gratitudes a day. But, some days you could be doing things and thinking, you start to do your gratitudes, and I'm not like I'm having a hard time coming up with a gratitude. And then when you pause and you really think about it, there's a lot of things to be grateful for. It's just not where my energy or where I focused my attention at that time. So doing these gratitude really is a reset, and it refocuses my attention, which then shifts my energy and shifts how I'm viewing whatever activity that I was in. It's so simple, and it's got an amazing effect.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. It's a good example of the kind of practices that I share in revolutionary optimism. I don't share that particular one, so I only share like 23 best practices, and of course, many more that are aligned and related, like what you're describing. Gratitude practice, and I what I would say is also it's good to experiment. Like, okay, let's experiment with 3 times a day. It's not good or bad. It's just an experiment. And maybe I need 5 times on a day where I've lost it. Or if I'm really in a state of gratitude, like just organically, then maybe I don't even have to have an intentional practice. I'm already there. So I think it's a beautiful practice that I do. I have a very strong gratitude practice. I work on. because I'm like grateful to be alive. I'm grateful to see the blue sky or the wind blowing or hearing the birds or whatever, little things that are happening. The taste of my coffee. You can be grateful for the small little things that we all are experiencing.
Yeah, those are all great examples. Like, I'm excited to be part of this revolution and co-creation of the new and the breaking down of the old. Does it always feel so good? Not always, but what a gift. What a gift we are to be here at this time on the planet.
I agree. Yeah.
In 2023, you launched a initiative called Unify USA Movement to create 2.0, the United States 2.0, I think. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I am an unbridled revolutionary optimist, in writing this book and now launching it today, May 1st, getting it out there, sharing it with the world. I'm so excited to offer it as a love offering, really. I have done the book, so I have Imagineering. I have built movements. I'm part of revolutionary movements that are happening right now. And what I have come to, and I'm in dialogue with many different stakeholders about this, is that you have to look at the root cause of the problem. As healthcare providers, I'm a doctor, you're a nurse, we realize that we can treat the symptoms, or if we have to get at the root cause of what's going on. So as I've tried to understand what is going on around us right now, I have concluded that as a doctor, my diagnosis is that we have what is called constitutional rot. Our Constitution was written 237 years ago by white male oligarchs who created a system of caste where they were keeping themselves in power and control, and they were oppressing women, indigenous people, black people were held as slaves, and poor white people were also marginalized so that they would maintain their power and control. What's fascinating is that it works so well. Like 237 years later, they've globalized this approach. And extractive capitalism and all the systems that we're living under are all emanating from that. So I believe that we need to go through what the legal experts say is that there are cycles of constitutional time. There's like a framework gets written, and then it gets rotten, and then it's transformed. So the big that happened significantly after the Civil War. There were a bunch of amendments that radically transformed the original document. And then the next biggest time was in 1924 when the women got the right to vote. That was 1920, sorry. That was the last time there was really an expansion of rights and freedom. That's over 100 years ago since we've had an upgrade to our founding order. And if you look at what's going on, like this whole battle between Trump and Biden, Democrats, Republican, I call it the racket, one thing. Just put that all over here. Turn the volume down because it gives me a headache and it makes me irritated. All of it. And then go over here and go to all this other space that exists. And that's the space in which we can co-create US 2.0. And that means a new framework, a new constitutional order, or whatever you want to call it. People think we need a new name, like a covenant or a compact or a contract, something about our relationship with each other and our relationship with the earth. And there are people studying all kinds of approaches to this. A lot of people agree that we need to transform it. People are too afraid to do it. They think we'll lose rights. And I'm not afraid because I believe 80% of the people in the United States agree with the principle of equity, equality, human rights, love-centered, repair, justice, and peace. That's what 80% want. And the 20% that don't want that, or that want to use violence, or that don't believe in the rule of law, that's not the people that we want running our government.
So, Paul, I come up to you and I say, hey, Paul, I want to awaken my political imagination and manifest a better world. What would you say to me?
I'm so glad to hear that. How can I support you? My role is I'm here to support you and everyone. How can I support you in what visions you see? In Unified Movements, our website, unifiedmovements.org, we have identified 25 movements that work on the climate issue, on racial equity, on Israel-Palestine, on a whole range of issues as pathways of engagement. The other big thing that I believe, and the book just got launched today, so I don't know this as a fact yet, but the 7 steps are things that can be done, and the learning can be done in groups, friend groups, family groups, neighbor groups, book clubs, church groups, synagogue groups, mosque groups, schools, workplaces, any group. And I think you could do a step a week over 7 weeks, or a step a month over 7 months. And it's an opportunity to actually build friendships and deepen relationship, because I'm telling you, this is not easy. And the whole point of it is that we're not alone. A lot of the times when I'm feeling hopeless and anxious and despairing, my inner dragon is telling me I'm alone. And, like it's over, it's hopeless, and nothing I do matters, and I'm alone. So I believe that revolutionary optimism is an opportunity for bringing people together and learning and exploring the book and the practices together and sharing. We talk about love speech, for example. So okay, what a group could understand what it is, practice it on yourself. How do you do love speech to yourself? Then do it within your group. And then, okay, everyone, let's go home and try to do love speech with our family or in our workplace, and then come back and share what happened, Or there's a practice called courageous conversations. We need to have difficult conversations with people. So there's like a step-by-step how to do that. So I think it would be really fun to understand what a courageous conversation is, practice it with a group, and then go out and do them. And then know that you have support to process it. And, what did we learn about how does it go with courageous conversations? It can be very heart opening and healing, or walls can come down too from the other side. So it's these are games and experiments and opportunities for shared learning and shared exploration.
Wow, thank you. That makes it sound very doable. It doesn't just sound like a concept that's out there. It sounds very actionable.
Yeah, we have a journal and a workbook that's also being published on Amazon very soon for groups and for group leaders and we have guiding questions for, how the group can explore each of the practices. So I really think that would be the most fun and most exciting. And then those folks become so connected, then they're like, hey, we got to fix our school, or we got to fix our church, or we got to fix our community, or, hey, we want to take on the climate emergency. And then there's all kinds of pathways that we're going to offer. We have a Changemakers companion kit that you can get access to at revolutionaryoptimism.com. It's all kinds of tools and support things that you can have if you want to go deeper into this revolutionary optimism exploration.
I love that you've moved it out of the theoretical. One of the things that you've repeatedly said that I think is really critically important, and I do want to highlight it, is when we're in separateness, it does lead us down that despair, or it doesn't feel good. When we move away from our separateness and realize that we really are one, it shifts everything and it brings us together. So it's just that I just wanted to highlight the importance of that.
Yeah, it's a great. Thank you for your clarifying that so clearly. Yeah, and I think we're living in these strange times of technology. We're all obsessed with our phones. We're addicted. They got our brains and they get us addicted to these apps and this information flow, and that's very isolating. I've learned, or I experienced it as. But also, COVID had a big impact of separating people. And even myself, I realized I used to be more social, and I'm like, hey, you know what? I'll just stay home tonight. We'll just order food in. I don't need to go out. And I think that's had a big impact on younger people, especially. It was a traumatic experience, a disruption in socialization and social connection. And some people call it, we have school and work and family time, but there's this third space of friendship and beloved community that we are weak at or we're missing. And I'm hoping, there's many ways to access that. So I hope revolutionary optimism can contribute to that for some people somewhere.
Nice. It's I agree that it's very important. You have a podcast that you do, Revolutionary Optimism podcast. For those who are interested in your podcast, what might they expect from it?
Yeah, as I was writing the book Revolutionary Optimism, I felt like I needed to do learning, and I have guests that are leaders, and I ask every guest, like, how do you do? What happens when you get hopeless and despairing? How do you cope with that? And I also ask them their struggles in the work that they do, and also their successes and failures. And then I challenge them on their imagination, and I ask them to imagine, what would it be like if something like a new constitution happened? How would that look like? We're going through a passage as humanity in our country and globally. And a lot of people, including myself, are trying to make sense of it. So I try to offer what's called sense making sense of what's going on. And so that you can go, oh, people are like reacting to all these like university campuses and all the protesting that's going on for the Palestinian liberation movement versus the Zionist movement. And there's like all this tension. And so I think that revolutionary optimism, and I think my job is really to help people like make sense of what's going on. And I'm really committed to peaceful resistance, peaceful nonviolence in the history of, in the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. and the Mahatma Gandhi and other leaders like that. It actually, we now have data and evidence that shows that it's more effective at bringing forward transformational change. As soon as violence comes in, the state can lock down on it, and it's those countermeasures like can kill a movement and can kill a revolution. Not all revolutions are successful. Martin Luther King was successful. He got major legislation through in the 60s, and it wouldn't have happened without a massive, peaceful, nonviolent movement. And I think that's what we need now. I think it's happening, and I want to offer myself up to de-escalate. Let's focus on peaceful resistance. Also, the police and military forces, inviting them to focus on peaceful responses. And I think both sides de-escalating right now. We are going to have a peaceful revolution, but let's do it peacefully on both sides.
I love it. Thank you for that. Do you have any events coming up this summer?
Yeah, there's some major events happening on June 12th. One of the partners of Unified Movements, Climate Defiance, is having a event in Washington. They want to interrupt the congressional baseball game. So they've invited people from all over the country to come and to let our congressional policy makers who make our policies or don't make our policies stop playing games with our future. And so there's an intent to interrupt the congressional baseball game on June 12th. And then June 13th, 14th, and 15th, there's a massive mobilization on racial equity. There's an equity march and there's an equity festival here in Washington, but we're also inviting people around the country to mobilize on June 15th, which is in recognition of Juneteenth, the new federal holiday, which was the day when the last people in Texas found out about Abraham Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation. It's right around the 4th anniversary of when George Floyd was murdered, and our racial equity work is unfinished, and we really believe that it's an opportunity to raise that up. And we have an agenda of action for achieving racial equity and healing the soul of America. And our political leaders, the Biden administration and Congress, have not implemented them yet. So we are intent on putting political pressure on our government for radical reparations and radical truth-telling so that we can heal the wounds of the past so that we can move on together as one people.
Well, thank you for that, Paul. It sounds like you've got a lot going on, and I think that your world's going to get bigger and bigger. For listeners who want to connect with you, how would they do that, and what might that look like?
The best way is to go to revolutionaryoptimism.com and get access all the support materials that we have. You can always also contact me through my website, Dr. Paul Zeitz. There's a direct pathway. It comes right into my inbox. Yeah, I'm also available to come speak and meet and learn, really. I feel like I'm going to be on pilgrimage where I'm listening and learning and transforming myself as part of this journey of revolutionary optimism. And I look forward to connecting with as many people as I can.
Well, I thank you. And I love that you're looking to promote peace, come from the heart, elevate consciousness, make a difference. All the different worlds. You've got your foot in all of these different worlds.
I think we have to unify, and it's go time. Like this is our moment. This is our chance for humanity to create this other way, or else it's going to be too late. So I'm having fun being in the game of that, and I welcome you and all your listeners to do what you can. Every action counts, and it matters.
I agree. Any other last thoughts that you want to leave with the listeners as we wind up here?
No, I just want to thank you, and it's go time.
I agree with you. It is go time on multiple levels. So
yeah,
I'm all in. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for all you're doing. I absolutely thank you for all of this information and really a different way to look at things, stimulating people. To all our listeners out there, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your day to join Paul and I with this episode. Remember, embrace that wild soul. Thank you, Paul.
Peace. Thank you.
Peace. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Wild Soul Gatherings Happy Hour for the Spiritually Curious. To learn more about our guests, please go to our website, wildsoulsgathering.com. We're very eager to hear from our listeners what you thought of the episode, topics you might like us to cover in the future, your thoughts on spirituality, questions you may have. Please feel free to send us an email at wildsoulsgathering@gmail.com. This is your host, Dr. Sandra Marie, sending each of you peace and love. Until we meet again, embrace your wild soul.